Please be seated. If any member wishes to remove the jackets, they may do so. Apologies for absence. I have received apologies for absence from Councillor Ames, Harkness and Sheldon.
Apologies from Councillor Marie Bashforth.
Thank you. Is there any more? Thank you for that. Moving on to the minutes. Is Council agreed that the minutes of the Council held on the 22nd of March 2017 be approved and signed as a correct record? Agreed. Declarations of interest. Are there any declarations of interest from members in respect of matters to be determined by the Council at this meeting? Yes, Councillor Stratton. All members have a pecuniary interest on item 17. Can Council note that all 60 members have received a dispensation from the Standards Committee in relation to item 17? Can you put your hand up if you have a pecuniary interest?
Okay, that's all 59 members. That's all 59, okay.
Urgent business? There are no items of urgent business. Communications relating to the business of the Council. The Council will be aware that Tony Larkin sadly passed away recently, and I'm sure the Chamber will join me in sending our thoughts to his family. Members have indicated they wish to speak. Councillor James Larkin.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. It is with the heaviest of hearts, but also the deepest of pride imaginable, that I rise to speak in memory of our friend, colleague and my dad. It is somewhat appropriate that it is the mayor-making meeting that we speak about Tony, as he always enjoyed this day, and in particular the camaraderie afterwards at one of Oldham's watering holes. It's this sense of community and togetherness that defined Tony's life and was the real theme of the celebration of his life last month. From his difficult childhood in Ancoats, Miles Platting and Collyhurst, Tony developed a real sense of duty and responsibility to others, instilled in him as much through circumstance as anything else. Firstly, through his devotion to his siblings, both younger and older, especially following the loss of his mother at the age of 15. However, as was Tony's way, he found time for everyone and seemingly everything. From his Catholic faith and service as an altar boy, through being the best young goalkeeper in Ancoats, even making time for a blossoming film career in A Taste of Honey. Nobody did boy on the left skimming stones in the Irwell quite like my dad. But throughout his life, it was his selflessness and willingness to help others that we will remember most about him. After joining the DAS board at the age of 20, Tony quickly found his natural home in the GMB, becoming a shop steward and eventually a national convener. I remember many stories growing up of Dad helping to keep people in jobs, sometimes when they probably didn't deserve to, fighting for better working conditions and pay, not just for himself, but for countless others. This outward look on life and desire to help others underpinned his time as a councillor also. First being elected in 1996, he served originally for 4 years before a 3-year hiatus. Tony returned in 2003, serving until recently. Respected across the chamber as a reasonable man, Tony was a man of deeds and not words, often telling me that he believed in speaking when he had something worthwhile to say. Something he's tried and possibly failed to impress on me enough, to be honest. Tony worked hard and was the best advocate imaginable for the people of Royton. Again, the recurring characteristic of a life helping and serving others, giving so much of his time to anyone who needed it. It is a great sadness that he did not get to leave this chamber on his own terms, but he would want us all to carry on to serve the people of Oldham with the same selflessness and devotion and giving nature that he did. That would be the best tribute possible. Although this is obviously a sad time for us as a family, we take great solace in the countless kind words by colleagues in this chamber, for example in the books of condolence that are outside if anyone's missed them and they want to write a few words in. Council staff and residents from across the borough. A life loved as much as Tony's must have been a life truly lived to its fullest. Thank you.
Councillor Stretton.
So to follow on from what James has said, if you only ever saw him in this chamber, you would think that Tony Larkin was a man of very few words. In fact, there may well be more words said about him here today than he ever spoke in here himself. But when he felt passionately about something, as he did about Royton issues, he would come and see you and he would put the case. And he took a keen interest in everything that was going on in here and in everything that was said. And he was always here. His attendance record, even during his recent illness, was impressive. He first came on council in 1996, and after a 3-year break, came back in 2003. It is particularly poignant that we are speaking about him at this meeting, because some of you will know that he was going to agree to be Deputy Mayor this year, as his length of service allowed him to do, in his last year of employment, and Mayor next year in his first year of retirement. He would have served as well, and his wife Penny would have been an excellent mayoress. Sadly, it was not to be. Those of you who knew Tony well would know he was passionate about his beloved Royton. He always stood up for the residents and took his job as chair of the district partnership very seriously. The district team there told me, and I quote, he was a lovely man to work for. And he was a man who did much without talking about it. For example, it was only at his funeral that I learned he spent many years supporting the homeless every weekend in soup kitchens in Manchester. But above all, Tony was a family man. Whenever I spoke to him in recent months, his concern was not for himself, but for them. His wife Penny, his daughter Sarah Jane, who prepared the beautiful roses that this group is wearing today, and Grace, his beloved grandson Alex. And he was so proud of his son James, following in his footsteps and becoming a councillor. He will be sadly missed and fondly remembered by them and by his friends and colleagues in this room.
Councillor Roberts.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Tony was my colleague for 3 years in Royton North, and I wanted to take this opportunity to remember him, particularly because I was unable to attend his funeral. Tony was ill for over a year. The first I knew was a tweeted photo, which I think I might have seen at a council meeting, of hospital food. I have to say he was not impressed. I admired his fortitude and stoicism in the face of not one but 2 diagnoses of potentially life-threatening illnesses. He faced all the ups and downs of the treatment and everything that he went through, and he refused to let his cancer define him. He was determined to carry on in his role as a councillor. He attended local meetings and chaired the Royton District Executive when he said he was well enough. I am not, however, sure that Penny always agreed with him. He always had the best interests of Royton at heart. He was clear about what Royton needed and determined this should be the best that the council and other public services had to offer. He was always straightforward in his views and how he expressed them. While this is not the right occasion for politics, Tony was a politician, and I know that he and Penny appreciated the care that he received, free at the point of delivery, from our NHS and from Dr. Kershaw's. His family was a source of pride and strength, and I know how difficult this time is for Penny, Sarah, Grace and James. I hope that they can look back with pride at Tony's long years of service to Royton and Oldham Council. Nothing we can say today can change how this feels for them, but I thought I would share some words with them and with you that I find helpful. Do not go gentle into that good night. Old age should burn and rave at close of play. Rage, rage against the dying of the light. Though wise men at their end know dark is right, because their words had fought no lightning, they do not go gentle into that good night. Good men, the last wave by, crying how bright their frail deeds might have danced in a green bay. Rage, rage against the dying of the light.
Councillor Jabbar.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Can I first of all offer my sincere congratulations to you for being elected the first citizen of this great borough of ours, and I hope you have a wonderful and successful term of office. Mr. Mayor, Tony and I met back in 1996 when we bonded over our mutual interest, and that mutual interest was, of course, Mr. Mayor, Manchester United. Those of you who know, you'll know that he was a great Manchester United supporter and a season ticket holder. But in all seriousness, Mr. Mayor, those of you who don't know, Tony and I sat next to each other when we first got onto this council on this very chamber. And what a stroke of good fortune that turned out for me. I couldn't have asked for a better person to sit next to and learn from. We bonded very quickly, Mr. Mayor, and we shared stories about work, about our wards, and often we chatted about the football, of course, and how Sir Alex Ferguson guided Manchester United to one trophy to another. And it was a really good point of conversation for both of us. I know some people don't agree, but I'm sure Tony's seeing from the heavens and smiling at that. But I think the reason why Tony would be remembered for, Mr. Mayor, is because of his family and what he'd done for the people of Royton. You know, he was a proud resident of Royton, but I think more than that, the local people recognized that and took to him straight away. And of course, as the leader said, he chaired the district partnership, and he did a fantastic job, and he was really very keen on taking on local issues and be a champion and advocate for people of Royton. And I guess that's why we're all elected, Mr. Mayor. That's why the people of our own wards actually send us here to be that. And there's no better person that I know who did that well than Tony. And I want to place my personal thanks to what he's done, you know, in this chamber for his constituents and for the people of Royton. And as well, Mr. Mayor, because of our closeness, I got to know his wife, Penny, who is here, their daughter, Sarah and Grace, and of course, James and the grandson, Alex. You know, as well as having a fantastic family, through his work, Mr. Mayor, as I've said before, he developed a wider family, which was the Royton community. You know, he was a very warm, friendly, passionate person. As I said, very proud of being a resident of Royton and being an advocate for those people. And I think despite him being a very big man, Tony was a gentle soul, and he always spoke very softly. Nevertheless, his voice carried far and wide, and I'm sure I speak for all of us here when I say he will be very sadly missed. Mr. Mayor, thank you for giving me this opportunity to speak about my friend who I hold very close to. I have a very fond memory of him. I just want to say that we've got a perfect person in James to carry forward the work, the wonderful work that he did for the people of Royston. Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Blythe.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I rise to pay tribute to Tony. He was a good friend of mine, and we go back a lot further than this council again. We went back into the 80s when he worked for the gas board and added. And Tony was a rising star of the union. He was the card steward at the time, but he soon made convener and then up to national convener. And after that, we saw little of him round Oldham in the gas board. But he went far and he did a lot of good things for the workers that worked in that industry. And then I come across Tony in '93 when he got elected as Royton North councillor. And we had the joy of being on the joint area committee at the time of Shaw and Royton. We have since been divorced, but there we go. When we were together, we were, and we chaired it, we set them up, and we were on the area committees, and he worked tirelessly, Tony, for residents of Royton. He wasn't just an advocate, he was the friend of most people in Royton. If you mentioned Tony to people in Royton, they knew him, because he was a man that got out, he got on the streets, and he did the dirty work, if you like, of the everyday politics that some of us have to do, always want to do, and some don't do as much of. But Tony was down there, out on the street, he could walk through the precinct, people would stop him and give him casework, and he took it on. And even up, the calibre of the man, even up to the weekend before he stepped off this mortal coil, he was doing casework. He was still doing, he's still taking casework on. I'm sure James will have to finish it off, but he will, because he has had a good teacher in his dad. His dad was an excellent teacher, he was an excellent politician, and a local politician. And if Tony thought it were right, he stood by it again. He's a bit like Shadab. Even up to the walk up to Tandlills Park, he don't agree with the GMSF, but Tony was there. As ill as he was, he got up to the top of that monument, and that is a hard slog for anybody. But the time, the condition Tony was in, and James and myself helped him across to the loud airlet so he could speak to the crowd, the gathered crowd, and he did it. And he still believed that GMSF, that the building on that land was wrong, and he made his voice very well known on that day. And that's the sort of man he is. It's his area, it's his town, his district, and it was his, and people respected Tony for what he did. And I respect Tony. He was a good friend of mine. I said, and we fought many things together, and sometimes we differed. That was politics. But he agreed to differ and never fell out with you over it. And that is another mark of the calibre of the man. And I'll go on to something a bit lighter now, because it was where the first time I come across James, and we at Royton and Shaw and Royton Districts partnership at the area committee as it was, we decided we should celebrate St George's Day, because people said we weren't patriotic in our country, so we started up the St George's Day celebrations. And I remember the first one very well. We had, it was at Royton and Crompton School, and we had all sorts of rides and bouncy castles and everything, and Tony right at the forefront helping to organise it with the officers ourselves, and we had an absolute wonderful day. We had the police there with a pursuit vehicle, we had a fire engine for the kids to look at, and we were challenged by the police on that day to a tug-of-war. Councillor, and it was, no, it was not the fire brigade, it was the police. We won. And you've got to think of the councillors that's in Shaw and Royton at the time. There was Howard, and myself, and Tony, and Steve. So we thought, we're in with a good chance here, but of course, Councillor Harrison, who was the sitting councillor with Steve's colleague, didn't want to take part. So we did ask the police if we could have a substitute. Well, Tony encouraged the police to let us have a substitute to make the numbers up, and they did. And we brought the ringer out, James. And I'll tell you, we pulled the police over 3 times, and they complained twice that we were cheating. But we have, the year after and the year after, we were never re-challenged. They never wanted to do that tug of war again. So I said, Tony was a giant amongst men. I always look at the £2 coin. It says, standing on the shoulders of giants round the edge, if you ever read it. And Tony was a giant of a man, not just in stature, but in his makeup, in his beliefs and everything. And James will follow, and he is standing on the shoulders of Tony. And he has had the best start in a political career that many of us would never have, because he had a good tutor and mentor. And Tony will always live on as long as James is in this chamber. He will always be in this chamber because James is here, and James had the same beliefs as Tony. And the other light to note, where I remember one night James started, he found his way to Sharewake, our local watering hole in Shaw. And I told Tony, I said, oh, I keep seeing your James at Sharewake. He said, when it gets to 10:30, send him home. So with that, I would say I am honoured to have known Tony, and I pay tribute to the man and to his beliefs. Thank you very much.
Councillor John Hudson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just want to say it's a difficult day for both Councillor Adrian Alexander and myself, because one could say that we feel pleased to support your morality, but very sad that we're here and Tony isn't. But I saw a different side to Tony during the year 2012-13 when I was the Deputy Mayor. How his Christian values came out, and the help he gave to Alwyn Chatterton was tremendous. So although I pay tribute to Tony and say to his family, we do appreciate what he did, it'll never take away the hurt of the fact he isn't here, and some of us are. But like my friend said, James is here, and I only hope I live long enough to see you become the mayor, because then I think it'll have been equalled out, James. I'm not sure you want it, but I'm forcing it on you at this moment in time. And I hope you'll consider having your mother, because I think Penny deserves it too. And I know you might have dabbled with a few women by then, but always, if your wife allows it, you know. But usually they don't tell them in writing, do they? You know, they do it anyway. So, but I think the nice thing about Tony was he was a committed Christian, and that isn't always popular today, but he really believed it, and he put into practice for Alwyn Chatterton, who could not have carried out mayoral duties without it. And it must be very sad for Alwyn to have lost her husband and then lose her friend in such quick succession. So, on behalf of all those people he's helped, I say to his wife and family, thank you for the service Tony gave.
Councillor Steve Bashworth.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor, and again, sorry for missing your ceremony, but I'm sure you've had a great time. You'll be a belting mayor. Thank you. There's been some really nice things said today, and Tony was a man of few words, and he hated long speeches, so deliberately kept this very short. But as he said, Tony was a true red in many senses of the word, wasn't he? He's a red socialist, a red MU supporter, but he had a fiery red temper as well if you caught him on the wrong side. And I'll tell you what, we've had one or two ding-dongs. But the thing is, with somebody like that is, when you do that, then you sit down, have a pint afterwards and get on with it. And that's a measure of tone. It's another thing. You could have your differences, you could argue it out, and then you'd sit down and get on with what you've decided to do. Tony was a man of honour. And that is a rare thing in this world sometimes today. He was a man who told things, it's already been said. He said it how it was, he said it direct, and he kept to it. But he knew how to balance the demands of his faith, which was it's something that was a big part of his life, his work, his family, his politics, of course, and his beloved football team, without compromising any of them. Another great quality of Tony. Now, Tony did have many personal qualities, and lots have been said today. But I'm not going to go on about that. And with somebody who's had such a full life, you can't get everything in a little speech like this. And as I said, Tony took no pleasure in long rambling speeches. And like Rod, I've got share lots of those memories of these events we've had and things like this. But I think one of my most enduring memories will be one December evening in Royton Town Hall, just after the Royton Christmas lights turn off. And if you can imagine, the children sat around the grotto that we've made up, parents there, and there's a 5'5" Father Christmas and a 6'5" elf in full Christmas regalia and makeup, handing out presents to the children. We had a whale of a time, I can tell you. Fantastic times. And then we've had lots of light-hearted discussions in pubs. It usually turns to things like politics and football, as usual. So, you know, there's lots of really nice things to say, but it seems to be a lot of politicians these days. I only go back to the early 2000s, some people go back further, but it seems to me that these days, in the days of throwaway social media where everything's sorted in a sentence or a paragraph, that politicians come in for a lot of scorn and a lot of discreditation where it isn't worth. And it's when people like Tony who get on with it behind the scenes behind the scenes that people don't see. And it's already been said that Tony was intensely passionate about his politics, intensely passionate about his own town. And it's just been said, so Rod's just said something, but I think some things are worth repeating. On that cold December morning, cold January morning on New Year, when we walked up, and Tony walked up, assisted by James and Rod, to the top of Tandle Hills, to that monument, to tell people about something he passionately believed in, even though he was absolutely poorly as anything, he was so weak. That is the measure of a man who means what he says and does what he says. That isn't some person who's in it for his own gain. That is somebody who's in for it for the genuine reasons. And again, as Rod's already mentioned, I was copied into an email only a few days before Tony left us, where he was dealing with casework. Again, another measure of the man, something that people will never see. So, Tony's moved on now, hopefully guided by the great faith he had in his God, the faith he had in the inherent goodness of his fellow human beings, which I passionately believe he had, and the faith he had in his socialism. But it's already been said, he's moved on now, and for his family, time will lessen the blow but never heal it. But we have to carry on. James will carry on. We have to do this because Tony told us to. So you've got to do that. But we want it to honour our promise because you told him that you would. So you honour that promise to him. It's already been said again, Tony's legacy has seamlessly moved on to James now, who is a fabulous councillor, a great guy, and I'm sure Tony will be massively proud of him. And he'll do his best. So goodbye, Tony. You're a great man, a husband, grandfather, a friend and a colleague. And we won't let you down. Thank you.
Also, Peter Jefferson, a former councillor serving in the borough during the 1970s, passed away in March. Can I ask council to join me in a 1-minute silence for our former council members? Thank you. Please be seated. The appointment of council leader. Can I call on Councillor Jabbar to move and Councillor Sykes to second that Councillor Stretton be reaffirmed as the executive leader of the council?
Delighted to move Councillor Jean Stretton. Thank you.
Does the council note the report subject to the provisions outlined in the report? Agreed. Appointment of deputy leader, cabinet members and deputy cabinet members. Allocation of portfolios and delegations of executive functions for the 2017-2018 municipal year. Report of the leader of the council. I call on Councillor Stretton to appoint a deputy leader, advise the council on the number of cabinet members, deputy cabinet members and agree their portfolios as circulated.
I am delighted also to move Councillor Abdul Jabbar as deputy leader of Oldham Council. There will be 8 cabinet members, each of whom will have a deputy cabinet member, and I move that they are as stated in the report.
Does the council note these appointments? Opposition nominations to the shadow cabinet. Does the council note the appointment of the opposition leader and the shadow cabinet as circulated? Appointment of committees 2017-2018. I call on Councillor Stretton to move and Councillor Sykes to second the appointment of committees as set out in the report as circulated.
Move, Mr Mayor.
Move, Mr Mayor, and there's one, I think, blank missing, which is myself and Oldham Property Partnership, bottom of page 34. I'm missing from the matrix. I'm the alternate after Jean.
With my amendment, does the council agree the report as circulated? Outside bodies and appointments 2017-18.
Move, Mr Mayor.
Can I call on Councillor Stretton to move and Councillor Sykes to second the appointments of outside bodies as set out in the report circulated?
Move, Mr Mayor.
Thank you. Does the council agree the recommendations on page 1 of the appointments to outside bodies report circulated? Council meetings. Does council agree that the meetings of the council in the 2017-18 municipal year will be held on the dates shown as printed on the summons and approve the calendar of meetings as circulated? Does the council recommend the approval of any outstanding dates or changes of the dates to be delegated to the chief executive in consultation with the leader of the council and the leader of the main opposition group, and the dates agreed today can only be changed in exceptional circumstances and only after the following agreed process? Notice of administration business, none received. Notice of opposition business, none received. Thank you for that. Constitutional amendments. I call on Councillor Stretton to move and Councillor Sykes to second the report.
Move, Mr Mayor.
Does the council agree the recommendations reaffirmed the Constitution and agree that any consequential amendments arising from any discussions are delegated to the Director of Legal Services to incorporate into the Constitution? The Members' Allowance Scheme. All members have a pecuniary interest in item 17. Can Council please note that all Council members have received a dispensation from the Standards Committee in relation to this item? Is it noted? I call on Councillor Stretton to move and Councillor Sykes to second the amended version of the report as circulated, as the Vice Chair of Oldham District Executive is no longer required.
Move, Mr Mayor.
Does any member wish to speak to the report? Does the Council agree with the recommendations as amended and contained within the report? That concludes the business of this meeting.